Okay, so our demo artist for tonight is Steve Berry. He's a darn good landscape artist. He is self-taught, started painting in his 30s while he was taking a class at the local college. He's a native North Californian. He loves to paint, loose, expressive, um, and loves to play with water and pigment. And he's had multiple awards. He's been in a number of publications, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he is going to conjure up tonight. He's also a member of the Venetia Plein Air Gallery. So let's welcome Steve Berry. Here he is. So unmute yourself.
It's still muted.
You're still muted.
He's working on it.
I can't hear you. Can't hear you. Steve.
He knows.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
All right. Who knows the magic of Zoom? Not I, obviously. I thought, everybody thinks you think you're a pro, and then you just whatever, have a difficult time. Okay. Well, I'm excited to be back. It's been a while since I've done a demo. And I just got to say, Amit Kapoor is a world-class painter. So if you guys want to paint plein air, like, boy, Amit's a great person to be learning with. So that's a real privilege, in my opinion. For today, I'm going to share my document view, and you're going to see me in a little corner. And I'm going to show you, I already painted I'm going to paint again tonight, so I can show you sort of final results of the process, and I can bring into my painting process a little bit of the thinking. So this little guy is what I will be painting for today. And I always say this and then everybody's very quiet, but I'm super happy to get questions. If you want to put them in the chat, then Liz can read them out to me, or I'm perfectly happy to have people talk while I am doing the demo. It's nice because it can get awfully quiet when you're painting for a long time by yourself.
Yeah.
So for this painting, the really golden trees are so pale in value that if I come in and do a sketch on here, the sketch will be left behind. So all I'm going to do is divide my painting into basically the horizon line in the sky and then down below. And I'll be doing just the tiniest little sketch on this. And I have this very simple little photo that I took. This is up on the Russian River. And you can tell already that they are not the same, right? I found this kind of static. This center spot here is where everything wants to go. And I wanted to unbalance it a little bit. So you can see here, this is really where the eye gets drawn. These trunks are very strong in contrast. And what I've done is I've made it just a little bit less of a bullseye, right? I've moved him around just a little bit. So having said that, let's just knock in the sketch, which is that I want to bring the trees in, and it's going to be very light. So it'll just be, it's barely a sketch, you guys. And here's another trunk. This is going to come up. Here's another trunk there. And here's the horizon line. And it's going to come across and it slowly goes down as we approach it because of perspective. So this comes in here, and then down in here, we preserve just a little bit of this foreground because there's going to be a transition for these little blue pebbles and things that are in the foreground.
So
And
Steve,
for a subject like this, boy, that's almost all I would do. There's little trees up here, and I'm going to sketch in this very bold, strong shadow line coming down, and that'll guide me later on. But it's really just almost like a geographic notation. So I don't lose my place and do something silly, right? Which is a real bummer when you do that. So with this, I just want to just remind myself later on where these things are going. And something like this is enough. And if I bring this up, maybe we can, there we go. You can just get the gist of the sketch. It's very light. And for subjects like this, this is a landscape, it's very forgiving. Nobody cares if my trees are the same size, right? It's still going to look like a tree in a river. It's not like I'm drawing a person and I really need a guide that has to be super accurate. With this, there's a lot of freedom. So I'm grabbing.
Steve,
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about the paper you're using
Yeah.
and
So
your paints?
and my paints. I was
Yeah,
just
and
thinking
your brushes.
So this is Saunders waterproof, and it's a 140-pound rough. Saunders has a kind of nice, I don't know, almost textile texture to it that I like.
Mhm.
And I like the rough, and I like Saunders waterford. It has a kind of, I don't know, softness to it, a little spongy. It'll soak up the water, and I can lift it and whatnot. I'm going to wet the back while I talk, and I want to do this first, and then while it is soaking into the sponge of the paper, I can talk about my paints and show you them. So this is a messy process. I always keep a towel down on the ground here underneath my setup, and it's because there's always water flowing everywhere for me. I'm a pretty messy watercolor painter, a lot of water. I wet the back of the paper, and you can see it's actually kind of rolling off the sheet. And I'm putting a little bit on my backing, which is a piece of gator board. And I do this because the paper will soak up the water and it into the body of the paper itself, and it'll help slow down the drying process. So I'm going to just gently mist it. I have here like a little kitchen mister. I use them for oil, things like that. And it has a really diffuse mist. So I back up and I just give it a little mist on the top. That helps equalize the moisture, because the bottom of the paper is receiving all this moisture and it's curling up, right? Because that's expanding. And I put a little mist on the top from a distance, and that helps kind of even it out. And then what'll happen is I'll be doing washes, and I can work on this for 30, 40, 50 minutes, and it won't be dry. I can go back in, I can lift, I can work a little more wet into wet, and it just sort of takes that rubber band, and that's like, let's say that's the length of time you normally have, and just kind of stretches it out and slows it down. So this is a great technique. It changed the way I painted because it let me sort of noodle around in the process, right? I didn't have to be like frantically trying to catch up. And that it was been an amazing thing. Somebody asked, does it dry flat? Yes, it does. And in fact, it dries more flat compared to if I used, the they all dry flat, right? If I tape it, it gets all buckled, and then eventually it dries flat. If I use bowl clips on it and I paint, it buckles, and then it dries flat. With this, basically, as it gets wet, the paper very gently expands on my backing as I paint, but it stays flat a long, long time. And you'll see maybe an hour into this demo, there'll be a little, maybe a bubble or something that is dry, and I'll peel it up and I'll dry that on the top, and I'll spray it on the back, and I'll lay it back down. And then I do have over here my hair dryer, and I do use it. And what's amazing is you can gently dry the top, and it will still have moisture in the bottom, and then I can just do my next layers on top. So it works quite well. It has little issues. Everything has issues, and this does too. I mean, it will see as we go into it what it does. So as this soaks it up, I'm just going to let this, it's flat right now. So I I was using for a long time American Journey paints from Cheap Joe's, but they just went out of business. So who knows what'll be next for me. But for a long time, I like cadmium lemon for very, chartreuse kind of greens. I like, I have cad yellow light, and I keep it in two wells. And in one well, I mix my greens, and with the other well, I make warm applications, so I keep them clean. I have cadmium orange. I have two wells of burnt sienna. I have a pyrrole red and a quinacridone rose, which I barely ever use. I have smalt blue. It's just like a fun little pigment that I'm trying out. It's a little bit of a violet. I have ultramarine blue in two wells because I use it so much. I have cobalt blue. And then I have a variety of greens because I paint so many natural scenes. I have cobalt turquoise light, which is a PG 50, I think. And it's a Winsor Newton pigment. This is a great kind of teal for mixing vibrant greens. I have Viridian. I have oxide of chromium, which is a great, simple kind of green. It's very opaque. That's really beneficial for doing applications where you're going to do covering. And then I keep a perylene green, which is almost a black, which is just an easy way for me to get a real dark green. And then I can pull it back from that dark green with, some extra yellow or something that I'm going to put in it. I'm misting my pigments. I'll be painting today primarily with this little synthetic. This is a Escoda Perla 12. And sometimes I'll dive into this little synthetic. This is an Escoda Perla 6, I think. And I'll do almost all the painting with these. I'll also be using a mop for large applications. This is an old, you can see beat up, a recab. This is REKAB. So this is a model that I picked up, and it's fine. But honestly, lots of mops are fine. I don't find mops significantly different. There are differences, but it's not a lot. So this is just a great way for me to cover larger spaces is really what it's about. So as this soaks the water in and I get rolling, I do this every time, but it doesn't want to come off. Here I am sideways. It's just water tension. And all that water I put on is barely any of it's coming off. There's a little bit here falling onto my palette. So it's soaking up into the body of the paper itself. And as I apply pigment here, it will kind of reach that reservoir inside of the paper, and that will let me essentially extend the life of my washes so I can work on them for a long time. It's very helpful. See if there's anything to know. I am using an easel, Barbara was asking. So I just have an easel underneath here, and it's a plein air setup, which is what I've used for years, and I just use it in the studio. And I made it, so it's a little bit quirky, but I have some YouTube videos about that. Okay, this is looking good. It's cool to the touch, but it's dry. That's the way it functions. So what I'm going to do is we have two kind of conflicting colors in this space. We have a kind of blue up here in the sky and there's faraway mountains. And then we have this very vibrant yellow that I have here. These are like cottonwood trees on the Russian River. And we don't want to make a green, but what I often find is, get off of there, is that as long as I'm not working it, it's not going to make a green, right? It's not going to, it really makes a green when we start to literally kind of mix it on the body of the paper. So that old adage where they're like, hey, you need to get in there and get out as fast as you can is really true. So do I pre-wash or soak my paper? I just moisten it and go. Exactly that. Yep. So, yeah, I tried that other method and I just found it was too much work for me. I didn't want to wait that long. So, all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the blue and I'm going to get it down here to the horizon line. And I'm going to start with the yellow and that'll let this blue sit for a little bit when I come in to touch it. So, and I'm using a synthetic, so the synthetic doesn't have tons of moisture in it. So sometimes also if I'm really slopping the pigment on, then it can blend into each other more because it's wetter, right? So there's more movement. So I often find that the desire to paint wet into wet, it makes people paint wetter than they should be. So my advice for wet into wet painting, I'm using cobalt blue here, is that it needs less water than you think it does. So I'm just going to block the sky in here, and I'm using the belly of the brush, it's sideways, so I can get little marks, and I'm just breaking up these marks. I don't want a big monolithic edge. Something like that. And then I'm going to do, looking at these faraway hills, they're a little bit warm. So I'm going to mix up burnt sienna and cobalt blue, and I'm just going to mute this color. So it'll be a warm, muted, faraway color. And just looking at this little tree and thinking about what the shape of the canopy is going to be. And right now I'm painting flat. So there's not a lot of movement to what's going on with the pigment, right? It's just kind of behaving itself. And going to come down into here. And then there's going to be these little bushes and things in the foreground. It's a bit of a blustery day here. I don't know how it is for everybody else, but I'm in my little studio and it is, the wind outside is a bit aggressive. So I'm mixing up a little bit of blue, and what I'm going to do is use a little baby brush, and I'm basically going to be mottling this area in the background just to make it not too flat, right? If I come in, I'm using a little synthetic.
We're gonna wash the faucet.
And I'm going to get a little bit of yellow and cadmium yellow light. I'm just kind of activating this area in the background. Want a little burnt sienna in it. That's more than I want. So mostly I'm just kind of making this look like far away stuff. It almost doesn't matter because it's so far away. But it's not sky, and I want it to look like not sky, right? That's the goal here. And then I can kind of put it to bed. Okay. Let's do these trees.
Mm.
And we're going to bond the trees to the sky. So I grabbed my yellow well that is for warm colors. And this would be one of the few examples in a painting where I really care about how clean it is. Because if you get a dirty yellow, it kind of instantaneously becomes not dirty, not yellow. Pardon me, I got an itch. Okay. So I can use a mop for this because I'm just going to block in an area, and it takes longer. It takes longer with the small brush. So I'm not making a giant puddle. I want it to be relatively vibrant. And I'm going to come in here, and I know in there's all these trees here that are dark green, but the yellow will just get covered up later. And watercolors is often more opaque than people give it credit for. So I'm going to block this in, and then I'm going to go back in with the other brush, and we're going to basically give it some detail. Okay. And now I can take my synthetic again, and the synthetic's going to have much less pigment on it. Going to come around here. I'm just going to let them blend together a little bit. I don't mind if I have, where's my rag? Oh, wrong shoulder. I don't mind if I have little bits of white. Maybe those are like little highlights, right? The sun is going to be coming from this side. And then later on, I can come back in after this is primarily all dry, and I can bring in pigment, and I can have it be thick and very opaque. And then I can do little highlights of the yellow, and I can kind of integrate the two shapes. Because right now that looks very conspicuous to me. Okay. So I'm going to dampen this little funny looking eyeball. I want to pull it back a little bit. And I do often I have my little towel on my shoulder. That's for often daubing off the brush. And then I'll keep a tissue handy almost all the time. So let's go into here. What I want to do is in the photo, there's little bits of orange and little bits of kind of lime green. And I am going to drop those in now. So I want to keep this yellow area yellow. So I'm going to get the orange and bring it over here because I'm going to be using the river later and I want to be able to drop the yellow in again and have the yellow be clean. So I'm just adding a little bit of cadmium orange to the cadmium yellow light, right? And I'm just letting them kind of feather their way in. And I see little areas, and I'm just sort of dropping it in. I'm not fretting too much about exactly where. I mostly want this effect of light. And then I can come in, I can do a little bit of splattering. Just to give it a little bit of texture. Hopefully that'll even back out. There we go. And now I can come in and we can do the green. So I'm going to use the same yellow. I just take it from the other well. And we want it to be chartreuse. So I'm going to grab this teal. And then I'm going to grab, I might actually grab the cadmium lemon. We can get a nice zingy kind of lime. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to splatter it in the same kind of way. Right? I'm just getting little leaf-like textures. And I don't necessarily want brush marks everywhere, right? So this is part of my goal, is just to give the illusion of detail through application of texture. So in here, on the shadow side, I'm dropping in lime, just a little bit. And I don't want to go too dark with this because this is where all the light is going to be in the subject. I just want it to look like a tree in fall, right? And I need it to be vibrant, sunlit and vibrant. Right. So I want to drop these kind of things in while it's wet, really let it push. So see in here, we have a little bit of lime. That looks pretty good to me. Later on, we'll take advantage of this by having, shadows, limbs, and then it kind of basically brings it into its own, right? That's kind of the way it functions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start blocking in the water. I'm going to use a mop again, just to kind of block in an area so that we can, I want to roll with this. Yep, I'm going to do it that way. So that I can then augment it and kind of build the reflections on the water. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep a little bit of a separation line that I'm keeping dry. And that's going to let me sort of have an area where I'm going to come back in later and build my shadows, and they're going to be hard edged, and then keep this area down here and have it all be wet, right? Wet into wet. And I'll be tilting the board a little bit so that it can run. Okay. And this is going to be some shadow work later, and I want a different value here. So I'm going to keep it blank for now, and I'm going to, you know what? Let's just block it in. Okay. So the mop is just a great tool for blocking in shapes. That's really what I use it for. I know other people use it for a variety of things, but I find for wet into wet painting, this is more than adequate. the needs that I have for it. This is meeting all the needs that I have. And then in here, this is gonna have to transition to blue again. This is the shadowy area. And so I'm gonna let this sit for a moment. I'm gonna make this kind of browny little space, kind of reflecting that again. It's a little muted area. And I'm mixing ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Nothing particularly fancy. Yeah, that'll work. And it even has less detail than the space up top because it's just the reflection. And what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to block in the paler values in this so that I can come back in wet into wet, and I'm gonna be painting my darks into this. Here I can see kind of pushes over a little bit. And then eventually we're back into the blue. A little bit of value in it. Okay, so for the blue, I need this little slate. I don't want it to be green. I'm going to clean it off. That becomes less and less important the farther into the process that I go through, because I'm making darker and darker values. But in the beginning, I like to have the colors be pretty clean. So I'm going to tilt my board just a little. Drop my blue in. And I can see now I should have dropped this yellow in a little bit further. So I'm mixing a little more up. Green yellow. Now I'm back into my blue. And what'll happen is I'll have just a tiny bit of green. I'll have a little transitional space. And then it'll basically just be blue. And then later I'll come in and put rocks down here, and it'll be basically a little shadow area. Okay, so it's washing down. Of course, nothing is quite as vibrant as it looks in my video. It's got a little more nuance than that, but it is vibrant down here. And then you know how it goes with watercolors. As it dries, it'll get more muted, and it'll be softer and softer. And that's good. That's okay. So for now, I'm going kind of whole hog, how in terms of vibrancy. And then as things progress, right, then I can make it more muted later, but it's never going to get more vibrant than it is now. So I want to make sure that I can get it as vibrant as I want it to be. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting in shadows first into the water, because I want them to be soft edged. So I'm going to drop in my oranges and my limes, kind of like what I did up here. And then I'm going to drop in some darker shadows, wet into wet. Now I want to do this. So I'm doing that flicking again. And getting some texture in here. I can see that we have the orange. So let's drop it in like here. Want to tilt the board just a little bit. I'm taking my cad orange and my cadmium lemon, and I'm just making up have more of a yellow orange, right? I'm just trying to mimic that. And then here, this comes down. It's got a little bit dirty. So it's making more like a brown instead of a yellow orange, and I want it to be yellow orange. So once again, I'm doing some flicking to get some natural patterns in here. Right? Don't wear your favorite silk shirt while you're painting in watercolors, that's for sure. So this comes in. This is looking pretty good to me. I'm just, even these oranges and the limes are still kind of highlights compared to the darks that are going to come in later. So over here, we still have a little bit of this kind of limey chartreuse. So I'm mixing up cadmium lemon and cobalt teal. And over here, I'm just splattering in some pigment. And oftentimes when I do these splatters, it's just going to soften up. It'll almost be like a wash. But if I use the brush, sometimes what'll happen is it'll actually lift pigment, right? And when I lift the pigment, then I have a kind of empty spot, and I don't like that as much. So I enjoy using this kind of splattering method. All right. So this would be as vibrant as it's going to get and as full as it's going to get, and full of color. So what I wanted, this is going to, the darks will go in here on the top as it dries. Down in here, I can put my darks in now, and I want them to be soft. And that's what's going to help the whole subject read. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up, I'm going to mix a dark. The dark will be ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. So this is like my way of arriving at my value, which is a dark value. And then I can start to add things like, this is perylene green. Maybe I add a little bit of chromium oxide of chromium. And then I can add just a little bit of green. And I'll take it from the well that is, well, it's supposed to be the well that's just for greens. So now what I've got is a dark green. I like mix my value first, then I can add my yellows in. So if I tilt this, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a tissue, and I'm going to dry off a little area here with the tissue. There we go. And the goal for this little area is I'm going to come down later with really dark, so it won't matter, but I don't want this to push up. So I'm separating the two out, the bottom from the reflection from the other area. All right. So I'm just kind of following along as best I can with little areas that are going to be highlights later, little areas that are dark and reflecting them. And I'm having to sort of like, rather than having the trees in place and then drawing the reflections, I'm going to do the reflections first, and then I'm going to put the trees in, and the trees will need to match the reflections. That's kind of the method I'm using so that I can get, somebody's got a radio or something going. There we go. So I'm using the reflections so that I can do it wet into wet first, right? That's the goal. This comes across a little farther away. And I want a little more yellow. It's a little bit lighter. So oftentimes people want to have things get lighter by adding more water, which is fine. But oftentimes I can get pretty nice effects just by adding a different color that's paler in value. So here I wanted to get a lighter green and so what did I do? I added a little bit of cadmium yellow to it. And basically it made it paler as well instead of just washing it out. So it's got a little bit of punch to the color. Here I'm using the belly of the brush to kind of get a broken edge. I can paint with my finger. And away we go. And I do want it to match whatever I do on the top, but I'm not fretting too much about it because I can always make the top match, right? And if it's not a perfect match, nobody cares. I don't care anyways. So I just let it go. Right? I focus on the whole experience instead of worrying too much about every detail. Yeah, something like that. So I'm using the belly of the brush again. And I'm just blocking in these darks. And even later, I'll come back in later, and you know how it goes with watercolors. As this dries, it'll actually get paler. And so I'll actually come back in, and make even darker darks on top of this. So I'm running out of pigment. I was a naughty boy. Didn't quite get enough of this mixed up as I wanted. Go. And once again, I'm going back at it. And time to move along, Steve. So since it's a demo, right? I could probably be working on this for 2 hours instead of an hour and a half and having a gay old time doing it. But I want to make sure we make enough progress that we can play with the other pieces of the pie. So let's get this in here. I'm going to do a little bit of splattering to get something organic. Yep. And we're looking pretty good here. And by the way, so I think you can tell, like, I didn't make a giant band of green. They're both heavy pigments, right? Cobalt's not light, it's pretty heavy pigment. So is cadmium. They don't like to spread and explode like quinacridone or something. And so they tend to like to sit. And as long as I don't put too much water in, I'll get a nice, soft, feathered transition between the two of them. Okay. This is still wet up here. That's okay. This is the part where I mute my mic and I'm going to blow dry the top and to help it make progress, right? So just a second. All right. So this is cool to the touch, but dry up top. And then the bottom, it is, as you can see, I'm sure it's rapidly, I came back in here and I did one little touch and then a little bugger. I'm going to fix it later. I'm going to leave it alone and stop trying to fix it. What I am going to do though, is play a little bit with water. So because this little area down here anything I want to do on the water surface, I have to do it now if I want it to integrate. So what I'm going to do is I have a real thin little synthetic brush as a sharp, sharp point, and I can basically paint with water. And I'm making little marks. And the way it always is these little marks at first seem quite small. They don't seem very aggressive, but they actually grow and they keep growing. And so I've learned to just make them and leave it alone. You need a thirsty brush. It has to be wet, but I'll daub it off almost every time on my little rag. And the goal is just to make little streaks in here. And if I can do the little streaks over areas that are dark, then it will be more obvious, right? I can do tiny little bit of splattering. And all I'm kind of doing is very gently, I'm sitting the water down, right? So it's just not so flat now. It's got a little surface to it. And as you can see, they still grow. They start out very, very small and they get bigger and bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this green and I'm going to get a little ultramarine blue. And I'm going to make a little tiny ripples that go under it like a little shadow. Less water. Right? Just a little bit. I think it's easy to overstate it. And I don't want to do too much of it. That should be enough. So this has to dry. As it dries, I'll come in later and I'll do even darker shadows. I can even put a darker shadow in, and then I could put water down here to soften its edge if I think it hasn't gotten dark enough. But all that has to wait until later. So let's do this area up here. And I'm going to start out with I'll use this synthetic. That's fine. It's got a nice sharp point. And I'm going to get ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. Just a moment. Are you out, Kitty? Nope. I heard my kitty cat. But he went away. And I'm just mixing up a dark. That's all I'm doing. I'm going to add a little bit of green to it. A little bit of yellow to a dark will make it a muted green real quick. So over here we have little tree trunks. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these tree trunks in first, and then I'm going to disrupt them as I build the canopy. I like this brush better. So this little rag it soaks up lots of water, just to say, right? So it's helpful I like to squeeze it out. All right. So back into here, ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, just making my dark value first. And then I'm going to grab my yellow from the well that I used to build my greens. There we go. And I don't have to fret too much if it's exactly like the photo, right? Nobody else knows what the photo looked like. So all that really matters is it interesting to me? And does it express trunks, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, I'm going to get a nice blue green in here. So I got cad yellow and cobalt. I had a little bit of this other muck in there. And I do a little tester and I say, looks great. So I'm going to use the belly of the brush and it's going to help me get little broken edges. And you can see in some areas, the little trees go away, but in other areas, they stick around. And that's a-okay with me. I can come in here. Here's the little line I drew before, just to express it with the brush. That's the edge of these dark shadows. So I'm gonna block in the edge, right? And then I'm gonna not block it in. I'm gonna cut this edge, and then I'll use my mop to fill this whole big space real quickly. I want it to be a little bluer and a little more vibrant. So I have some Viridian and Cobalt with a little bit of yellow. Because oftentimes things look a little bit vibrant when you're first laying them down. And then with time, you think, oh, I should have gone for it and done something more colorful, because it all is going to get more muted later. So definitely that is an approach, an opinion, a perspective that I've had to sort of learn through tears to be bold, basically. Be bold with my color. Okay. As I go through this here, I'm taking just a little bit of clean water, and I'm just softening a couple of edges with clean water just to get it so it's not all 100% this giant hard edge. I want a little bit of variety. Did anybody have any questions at this stage about my process, or if there were things that you didn't know about, or this is a great chance to ask. So I thought I'd check in with folks. I have the chat box open, so if you prefer to use the chat box, then I can see what you guys are typing.
We're just fascinated with how you go about doing this.
Fair enough. Sometimes I'm fascinated and like, what do I need to do? There we go. I left, there's little sparkles in here, and they're not really planned. They just kind of happened organically because of the paper and the brush, and I like to leave them. So this is coming down into here. I think this is dry enough. Yep, we're fine.
How much do you feel like the wet of your paper, like that beginning stuff, is affecting your paint now?
Do you mean like the wet into wet, or the wetting of the back of the paper?
Well, like you wet the back, you let it all absorb. I find when I'm painting like that, it's harder to get a crisp, a crisp edge, and
Sure.
I,
So this area down here, just to say, it is still moist down here.
yeah.
So for sure, if I want any crisp edge, oh, I forgot.
It's not there.
I couldn't get it there now. I have to wait, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then
But
I
even
put
now
the
where
area-
your brighter green is hitting the lower edge, it's not bleeding in.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is relatively dry here. I just recognized, I'm gonna see if I can mix this up and trick it in here. I forgot to put the tree trunks in. So, but the truth is when I did this last time, what I learned is that if you do it too early, the trunks just become blobs. So it's somewhere in between, in a perfect world, they'd have a little bit of a soft edge. These will be a little bit hard, but what I need is for them to be pale in value so that they're not competing with the rest of the shadows. But I need these up here to communicate with the other trees. That's pretty important to me. So, right, this area here, I'm getting little hard edges. I'm using a very small synthetic. So, right, people, in my opinion, underestimate the value of going to go up. The value of having a smaller brush to reduce the amount of water that you're putting in. And I think they undervalue the importance of a synthetic. I just think synthetics are very valuable if you are if you're painting wet into wet. I think it's really, people paint wet into wet because they love it to be wet, but that is you can't control anything. So to me, what's really magical about wet into wet painting is that you when you're done, yes, it's all soft, but it's not a giant mess. Somehow it feels magically like, wow, this all just softened in just the right way to express this reflection or whatever it is, right? So it isn't just like higgledy-piggledy going everywhere. No, right? It requires some kind of control so that it expands where you want it to expand and doesn't just explode on your paper. And for stuff like that, I do find having a synthetic is really important, and actually shrinking your brush can be really important. If I had a bigger synthetic, it's going to put more water on the paper, right? So that is important for me for this process. And I think that, yeah, this is good. It's dry enough. The wetting of the back of the paper, that is something that it lets me, like, if I wanted to come in here, I could still work in this area. It's been an hour since I started, or 45 minutes since I dropped this in, and it's still just fine. This is all still moist up here, right? And if I want to come in and, okay, I'm putting a little spittle on it, and it'll make little speckles. Why? Because it's still moist, but not like an explosion of water. If I had put a giant mop in here and it was soaking with water, that would stay wet for a long, long time since I wet the back. I can't do that if I want to have any kind of, if I want to be able to advance. So some painters that I've learned from and I've seen paint, they really they don't wet the back, and therefore they tilt their boards, and then when they paint, everything dries pretty quick, right? Because all the paint is sort of running down the paper. And I think if you're painting that way, then you can use a mop and be sloppy, and it's all going to, move, and it's going to dry quickly because you are, there we go. Because the paper isn't this wet sponge. Whereas I'm trying to paint, I like this process. I find it really helpful. So I accommodate the wetness of the paper by using brushes that use less water, essentially, right? You got to pick one way or the other if you're going to, however you're going to approach the moisture levels in the paper. So that was a really long-winded response, but I don't know if that was hit on what you were asking about in regards to is the paper affecting how I'm painting, and is it still affecting it? That kind of conversation that you were asking.
Yeah, I think it did, and I also appreciate the conversation around the synthetic brush because I mean what you're trying to highlight is that it holds less water than a natural bristle, right?
Yep.
And so you're
100%.
controlling your lines and things by putting less water with your pigment.
Yes. And I think it has lots to do with, like, there's a lot of different ways to approach this process. And pardon me, here I'm going to use the belly of the brush because this is all wet. I mean, this is all dry here. But
Yeah.
I don't want to have this look like a little, green concrete or something. It has to have a broken edge. I can use the belly of the brush. I can kind of scrape the surface. The brush
Sure.
isn't soggy. I'm always daubing it off very slightly, and it can help me get a natural edge, right? Same thing here. I'm using the belly of the brush. Sometimes I find people are too in love with the tip of the brush, which has its place, but there's lots of great opportunities to use the belly of the brush to get really natural kind of marks. But just to finish the other thought, yes, I feel like there's a lot of ways to approach it, but whatever way you approach it, you have to have like a united system. So I know for many people who are still learning to paint that it feels like nobody agrees with each other, right? You're like, well, I just took this class with this one person, and then I tried this thing, and then I took a class with another person, and they did this other thing, and they don't even agree with each other, right? Like I've had students say that to me, and I think that's totally true. And it comes because everybody's developing a system that works within itself, right? So if I'm tilting my board and I'm taping it down and I don't wet it, then I can use a much wetter brush. And it'll get soggy in there and I have to introduce the water in a different way. If I'm going to wet the paper the way I'm doing, then I'm going to control it in an alternative way, which is with the synthetic. And I like how much time I get. I get lots and lots of time. So as a studio painter, this is really powerful for me. I can work on these little paintings as a couple hours sometimes, and it'll be fine. There's not a big problem. It'll be moist for a long time, and that's great. Super helpful for me. So I'm going to put even darker shadows in here, so it's not such a big block. And I'm going to put shadows up here, but these shadows are in a sunny area, like there's a lot of light bouncing off of everything. So these shadows are going to be paler and more vibrant. So I'm going to take here the Parylene Green. It's practically black. I get a little bit of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. This is a dark, dark, dark blue-green. And I just want to come in here and at first you think, holy shit, pardon me, holy crap. Is that even any better? I don't know. That's crazy. But it's going to soften, right? Everything's going to soften. So I'm not super duper concerned about these values inside these dark shadows. These will be things in here. It's like, areas inside of the body of these trees. I just want to get it a little bit more muted, but I just want to get some variety of value inside of this massive, vegetation. We don't really even know what's going on in here, but we know that there probably are trees and trunks and stuff, right? As is the nature of nature. So here along the bank, it'll often be a little darker. There's often little shadows along its edge. Yeah. And it slowly is stepping back. Yeah, see, when I look at this on my screen, it's like a black hole. But in person, this is a more muted black. And then in here, this is a little bank of some kind of vegetation. I need a little bit of yellow in there. There we go. Kicks out. So I'm going to splatter in here a little bit just to create some natural variation. Splattering is a little art, and my experience is it's very important which direction you point your brush when you're splattering, and you got to know what else is around here, right? In terms of if you have errant splatters, does anybody care? So down here, it's all very soft. I don't want errant splatters. Up here, I don't care. It's going to be, all full of vegetation. So I'm mixing up. I have here my yellow from the well for greens. I have a little bit of cobalt teal. I have a kind of a middle valued yellow. I mean, a middle valued green, right? Kind of a sap green. And I want to get it a little more vibrant. So I'm just adding more lime, I'm adding more teal, right? And eventually the ratios will shift and it'll become a little bit more vibrant. So in this area, I want some small shadows. So, this is not super wet. If I tilt my palette, it's not like making a giant pool. And I have my brush. Now and I daub it off. I don't want too much on this, and I'm gonna do a little test. Yep, that looks good. So in I go, I'm using the belly of the brush, right? And all I'm really doing is I'm creating light on one side of this tree. There are little sections of trees and things in here, and their shadows are shadows of the tree in the sun. So I want their shadows to be more vibrant, paler shadows, right? So that even the shadows can express the light by their context. Just using the belly of the brush again. Liz, it's 8:14 and I started this demo earlier than I originally thought. So my question is, do I need to end by 8:30 or do we have a little bit more time?
Oh, no, you got till 9 o'clock.
Okay. I don't know if I'll need all of that time,
Well,
but
whatever you need.
perfect. What I do know is I'm going to need more than 15 minutes. So
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking,
You're fine.
hurry up, Steve.
Yeah.
Right. So I find sometimes with these little kinds of shadows that I'm building, the really tricksy part for me is not to overstate the shadow. I mean, I think it's really easy to paint too many shadows and not trust your light to do its job, right? And you're trying to make all the form, you're trying to build the form with the shadow instead of thinking, well, when I make this shadow here and here, what I'm really doing is creating this light area in the middle, right? It's easy to forget that that's what you're doing. And so you start just building everything with dark shadows everywhere. And I find that it loses a sense of delicacy, right? So I like to try and I like to call it, I creep up on my painting. I if I was doing this just by myself in the studio, I would probably take longer if I wanted, right? And just kind of creep up on it. Think, oh, is this dark enough? No, a little bit more here. And then sometimes when I pull back, it's obvious what I should do. So I try not to go whole hog right off the bat. And I find this method of wetting the back of the paper is a great way of allowing me to creep up on things, basically, right? I don't have to worry about like what's the famous Sargent quote? It's watercolors is making the best of an emergency. Um, and I think we've all been there. So I try to remedy the emergency experience as much as I can. So I was just doing a little bit of splattering, and if I put my hand here, you can see more values, right? There's just a little bit of texture in here. If I bring this up, there you go, right?
Yeah.
You get a little sense of the speckles in the highlights. So, and there we go. Hi, kitty cat. You want it? Yeah? Okay.
So I have a question. Are you trying to match the shadows on top with those in the water?
No.
Okay.
Is the short answer. But I forgot. But what I did do earlier in this process that was very helpful for me is that I sort of geolocated the trunks, and the trunks are dictating a lot of the shadows. So, right, so I think, broadly speaking, this is supposed to match with that. Maybe I need to bump it over a little bit. But right, this was matching with this area down in here kind of thing. So that would be an example of when you're doing a demo, sometimes you get lost in the chat. But when you're doing it by yourself, you pay more attention to certain kinds of details. I'm often very interested in texture. So however I can find a way to make texture that feels organic and natural, I'm interested in. So I do find spittle is a great simple texture. Splattering is a great simple texture. And that way in other areas, I can have soft textures and it all makes sense. So I'm looking at my drawing and I have this tree trunk over like half a quarter inch, but the reflection I put in is a little bit over. So I'm moving it over just a bit. To try and relate to what we see here in the reflection. And here we have the second one. And it comes out. And I don't want it in this area up here. It can't be as dark. If it's as dark as it is down in these heavier trunk areas, it'll just super outcompete the sunlight on these little branches, and I don't want that. So I need it to be a little bit paler out here. There we go. You can get a little bit of sense of the value. And then I just want to make something organic with the tree trunk and the shape of the tree going up. Right? These were cottonwoods down on the Russian River. So I guess as a person who's very engaged with trees as a part of my life in general, I do like to kind of know what kind of tree it was and how they grow, and am I representing that growth properly, right? Like oak trees look different than cottonwood trees. And now over here, there also are little dark bits. So I'm going to come in here and draw in little branches and things. I don't need to overstate it. I just need enough of it, right? I like to think of it as it's like a symbol, and the goal is to figure out for yourself, and I have my own ideas about what I like. How much of something do I have to include for it to unlock the little symbol, right? How much tree trunk do I have to include for you to go, oh, that's obviously a big bank of trees, right? It doesn't take much. It's often you can kind of overstate it when you get too realistic and it'll kill a little bit of the magic. But I think you need a little, right? And then you're done. So I want to get to a stage in this painting where I can do a little bit of opaque work down in here, and some yellows up in the tree. So I want to push into that before we finish today. I'm grabbing some chromium oxide or oxide of chromium, and I just want to drop it on top of this to help separate out. It's like a little bank of, in the photo, it's like, some sort of aqueous plants, like something growing on the surface of the water. For this, it's just a little object in the foreground, just a little bit in the foreground of this big shadowy bank. And so I want to separate them a little bit. So I'm going to come in here. There we go. Now I can soften this up with the belly of the brush, kind of connect it to what's above it, just to separate the two. These are like two separate shapes in this area. So as this dries, I'm going to blow this dry, and then we can do what I would call the finessing. So for example, I would like for this area to be a little darker. Now the shadows in this are darker than I want to make them, but I'd like for this area in here to be a little bit darker around the shoreline. And once I've dried this, then I can do that. The other thing I want to do is I'm going to put in pebbles and things in here in the foreground. And pardon me, I'm turning off the heat in here. I'm cooking. There we go. So I want to darken this area up there. I'll darken it and I'll put water, clean water on the bottom just to soften and connect it. We need to put the pebbles in. And then I'm going to do a little bit of opaque work up in the tree to help kind of create a transition between the sky and the tree and how they're going to interact. So I'm going to blow this dry again, and just enough that I can work on top of this and not have it create, bleed back and do all the terrible things, cauliflowers and things of that nature. So let me hit mute. There we go. So here it's just picking up a little bit. It's peeling back. So I want to show how I deal with this. I'm going to peel it up, and I'm going to start to spray the back. And definitely this is part of the process where there's compromises to be made for different methods. So I wet the back, I lay it back down, and the water is going to start to push through to the bottom. And it'll start to pop up on the top. I'm going to gently mist it. I'm going to hold this down to create some contact between the paper and the board. There we go. And now everything is starting to soak up the water again, which is what I need. And I'm lying it down, curling it as I lay it down so that it'll contact the paper as it goes, and then it'll stick to the paper better. So this is looking pretty good. Here it's starting to pool up at the bottom. Here's my little finger. So I'm going to come in with my tissue and I'm going to start to daub this off. If I don't daub it off at the bottom, it will make cauliflowers at the bottom. That is definitely one of the compromises of the method. Okay, this is looking pretty good. Let's do this dark up here, sort of create a little bit of perspective and depth on the surface of the water. So I'm grabbing the Parylene Green to darken this up a little bit. And I'm thinking you can see this area before, when it was wet and fresh, it was like a black hole in these bushes, but now it's just kind of a gently organic shape. So I'm going to come in. Yeah, that's pretty nice. And start to create this surface of the water. And remember, there was like some craziness here, and I thought, well, that was a pain. But it now is the time where we can start to do gentle repairs in the subject. So I'm going to lay these in, and then I'm going to soften the edge. So I'm already covering that. And of course, it looks super wonky on camera, but it's not quite that wonky. This is weirdly flat. Just kind of adding some texture to it. I'm coming in underneath it. And I need more darkness. There we go. So once this is coming down far enough, and that probably is far enough because it's going to dampen off and it's going to get paler and more muted as it dries. I'm getting clean water. So I always have kind of a dirty water bowl and a clean water bowl. And it's hard to do that when you're painting plein air, but in the studio I can do whatever I want. So I'm gonna put a bank of water in here, and I'm gonna kind of kiss the edge of this. There we go. And it's gonna come down into this little area that I've preserved, right? And I'll have a soft edge. And I left these little tiny bits that are dry. I actually think they're kind of nice. I'm gonna do it in here as well. Soften the edge. I'm always dampening it off on my shoulder so I don't have too much water on the brush. I'm all, as I think it's probably kind of clear, I'm all about kind of, it's like if you're dancing with somebody and you're teaming up. It isn't like one of you runs everything. And I guess I feel the same way about teaming up with water. It's a dance, it's a team up. So you're you're partners. And so that means to me that I don't want water to just run everything in the painting. I need a little bit of control. So I'm definitely interested in teaming up, which to me just means, we're partners. Water doesn't get to do just everything at once. I need to use it and have a bit of control as well. So this is looking a little better to me, right? It's kind of receding into that space. I'm going to take a little bit of water and thin that out. And I'm going to come in here with the belly of the brush, right? And it's catching the surface of the paper ever so slightly in here. It almost looks like ripples on the surface. And it also lets me kind of graduate down from this very dark that I just dropped in, which of course is going to get, paler as it dries. But it lets me graduate down from that into something. I need to somehow create a transition into this original area. Okay. There we go. So for now, I'm going to say the water is done, and it's going to dry out, and then we're going to see how it looks. Down in here, I'm going to make a dark blue. I'm going to grab the cobalt blue, but I want it to be blue and dark, but not black. I want a little bit of color in it. So I'm going to aim my brush this way. I'm going to do splatters in this area. I'm going to do splatters. I'm definitely not like going bang, 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 and just, goes everywhere. So I tend to use a flicking motion, and the other thing I can do sometimes is I'll use paper. I'm grabbing a piece of paper or a tissue. That's right. Here we go. So tissue goes down to protect my paper. Now I can splatter away and I don't have to fret. And this for me is going to be the sort of the base material upon which I'm going to grow this sandy, rocky beach, right? So I'm going to pull it back, right? And that's the beginning of all the other textures that I'm going to build up in here. It's, of course, it's not finished. I need to make it more organic, right? Have a little edge. I'm going to go the other way so they don't all match up. And then I'm going to start to lay down the belly of the brush to create little rocks in on the river's edge. And slowly what will happen, if I do my job right, is this area down here will start to read like a sandy little beach, right? So where it's like watery, and we have this transition into the river, which is where I was, right on the edge. So I don't like it to be too consistent in terms of all lined up. Sometimes in the rivers, there'll be like one little spot where maybe there was a bigger stone, it's farther in. And there'll be some little piece of land that went in where maybe there's more stones, right? In that little space. And this for me is really done by feel, because I think it really comes from just whatever it is you're painting. If you've been in that experience a lot, then what does a tree look like to you? What's the edge of a river look like to you? And that's not about painting to me, that's about living. So I'm just starting to get the edge. And now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use the belly of the brush again. You're welcome, Mary Tessa. And I'm using the paper's texture and the belly of the brush. I just saw about how do we re-wet. That's a funny word to say. Re-wet the back. And she was saying, thank you. So again, when I use the belly of the brush and it's really going sideways, I'm just kind of just bumping up against the edge of the paper's surface, and I can use that for my advantage, right? So, and it creates this pleasantly organic pattern that starts to look a lot like something organic. And you can it could be the texture on a rock, a boulder. It could be ripples on the water. It could be a sandy beach. It can be foliage on a tree. Lots of different kinds of organic things that it's very hard to paint it with a brush, right? And make it look correct. Somehow I need to have two objects interact with each other. I need to have the paper and the brush, or I have to have splatters on the paper, and it has to be less about me making the right mark and more about kind of almost like a chemical process where the goal is to get these two things to interact. So, and when they interact, then I start to get what I want. Now I might come back in here later and I might make little shadows on a stone and just to finish this little area. But for now, to me, that's a good start. And it feels very shady. It feels very recessive. So up in here, what I want to do is tilt this. Let me see if I do something here. I'm just turning down a light. Hey, look at that. You can see my painting. There we go. I turned my light down. And I think, oh, that is a much more accurate description of the values and the color. So I was just mixing up a muted gray to see if I wanted to put a little something on the surface, but I'm not 100% convinced, so I'm going to do it on the edge. And I think, okay, because I've done this before where you do that and then you think, it looks like somebody put a candy bar on the middle of your painting. And so it can be really a bummer when you have something too aggressive in terms of value. So it's nice to test it, basically. And I'm gently lifting a couple of them. I'm using this as a little painting tool. In essence, it's like a little lifting tool. And this is looking pretty good. I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to paint opaquely. So because I thought I wanted to share that because that is something I actually do quite a lot of. So of course I could paint with gouache or something like that. And sometimes I do paint with gouache on top of my paintings. I often mix a little bit of body color. Body color to me means I'm taking my watercolor pigment and I'm mixing a little bit of white into it. And so I'm making something like a gouache. But also it can just be that the pigment is pale and thick. So when I use a brush like this and it's small, and my mixture is thick, right? It's a gooey little mixture. Now I can come in here and I can test it first. It's always good to test it. Actually, I think I want the lime. Yeah, the lime will be even paler in value because it's closer to a pure yellow, and the cad yellow is more like an orange yellow. And I'm just coming in here and I'm just scraping the surface of the paper with this small brush. And I'll try and show you in a minute what I'm trying to do. I have some lovely soft edges over here, and I don't want to screw with them because I like them. But there are other little areas where I'd like a little punch to my yellow. So if I come up here and try and show you guys. So I like this really soft edge. I think it's kind of elegant. I don't want to mess with it. But up in this other rest of this area, I'm going for that that golden kind of fall color, right? On a cottonwood where it's very strong. And the thicker we can get the pigment, as long as I'm not, gobbing it on, then it'll kind of hold its color when it dries. I can scrape it, use the belly of the brush again, get more of that lemon yellow, right? Lemon yellow is often going to be the palest value. Going to drop a little bit in here. And, when I have it be very dry and I'm using a little brush, what'll happen is I get lots of texture from the paper and the brush, and I'm dry brushing is in essence. So it can not fill up a whole area. It'll kind of, it's like scrumbling is really what I'm doing. And it'll just bump along the surface and it'll add it, but you can still see the orange popping through. So I'm just going to do a little bit of this. And it adds a new layer of texture, right? I went from light to middle to light on top. And it just helps create this kind of realistic exploration of color. I'm just scrubbing this in here. And I'm actually going to do a little bit of the same over there, but with chartreuse. So I'm going to take the lime, and I need to daub this brush off so it's not carrying any water. And then I'm going to grab a tiniest of tiny little pieces of blue. I don't need much to turn a lemon yellow into a chartreuse. Doesn't take much. Tiny, 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 tiny little bit. Now I can come in here and I'm going to scrumble in this chartreuse dry brush on top at the end here. It's going to help push the color that I'm interested in pushing while keeping it light, and you can still see some of the yellow through it. I'll show you guys. I'll try and come in close here with bring it up to the camera. Right, and I got to think part of the goal with this painting, to me, part of what makes it interesting is that we have this kind of, I'll call it peppery seasoning up here on the trees that are capturing the light. And then down in here in the river, it's very smooth, very soft. And maybe it's not even that soft in nature, but I don't care. I just want to have this experience visually that will express the feeling when you're down by the river. And that's enough for me.
You have 15 minutes, Steve.
Perfect. So I am on my last little legs here for this little subject. I'm feeling pretty good about it. And I don't know how much more there is that I'm going to do in it. I did want to share about some of my upcoming activities
Oh, go ahead.
and whatnot. So in 2 weeks, I'll be at the Saratoga Fine Art Festival. It's the Saratoga Rotary Art Show, I think is what they call it. And I'll have a tent. I'll be selling paintings there. And I'll be doing a new method, which is that I will be taking some of my watercolor paintings and I'll actually be mounting them to a wood backing. And then I will be doing an archival spray varnish over it, like a matte varnish to protect it. And then I'll be selling them that way rather than having them all be framed and behind glass. But I'll be there at that. And then I'll also, the weekend of Mother's Day, I will be having an open studio here at my studio and in my garden that weekend. And so I'll have my tent up in my garden. I'll be inviting you guys into my studio, and I will be having an open studio and doing a sell here at my house. So and I live up in Vallejo, so I'm in the greater Bay Area. I'm just across the bridge from Berkeley and Pinole and El Cerrito.
So people want to know where your studio is.
So my studio is in my backyard. And let me how can I do
And
it?
you put it in the chat?
Right? I was like, yeah, let me grab
Well, good.
yeah, don't worry, I'm almost done, so I think it's fine. My studio is in my backyard, is the short of it. And I built it. It's a little, like 100 square foot little joint. And I live in Vallejo, so by Benicia and just across the bridge. And I design gardens for a living, so I have my garden here, and I'm hummingbird and butterfly garden and a bee garden, and then we have bees and hives. So we share all that fun stuff when we do the open studio. And then I open up my studio here, exactly here where I'm painting, and you guys can come and we can visit, and if you want to buy something, you can. And if you don't, we just visit and have a good time. So all of that I'm splattering now just to add a little bit of texture. So once again, I'm putting a light on top of a dark, which I know is like sacrilege, but it works really good. I love it. And it makes it very organic. And
So what's your address? And I'll put it in the chat for you.
thank you. So My address is 1160 Hargus Avenue, Hargus, and I'm in Vallejo.
Hargus.
That's correct. And it's Vallejo 94591. But also, if you guys go to my website, my most recent blog post has all this information in it about the Saratoga Art Festival, which is down by San Jose, where I'll be selling, and also the open studio here for Mother's Day weekend. So, and it has a photo of my studio and
So
different.
is it going to be both days?
Yes, it'll be both days. So the one in Saratoga is Saturday and Sunday, and that's the weekend of the 3rd and 4th. And then the open studio here at my house and at my studio is Mother's Day weekend. I think it's at the 10th and the 11th. So, so I'll be here, and so will my wifey. She'll be helping me run the
It's
show.
1160 Hargus, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And like I said, if you guys go to my website, which is my name, so it's Stephen Berry, StephenBerry, Stephen Berry Art, .com, then you guys can see
Okay.
it all there.
And what are the hours?
It's going to be 10 to 5 for the open studio, and I believe it's 10 to 5 as well for the Saratoga Fine Art Show. And I'm just trying to type here one-handed in the chat. And so that there is my website, StephenBerryArt.com. So
Okay.
that's fun. And so the season is starting up, and so lots of stuff is going on, and it's great to kind of finally get out there and share my art that I've been painting here, snuggled away inside my studio. So this area up here, I wanted to bring it in so we can kind of see. I can get this close and we can get it to focus. But I think you guys get a sense that I'm going to share the photo of the finished painting, and they're going to share it with you guys. But there's this kind of scrumbling. So we have the original very pale yellow wash under it. And then on top of it, we have that chartreuse lime, and then a little bit of the yellow, and it's pushed on, for example, on top of the blue and in here. And it just helps create this kind of dynamic, multi-layered color experience, which is hard to get if we're doing it 100% wet into wet. So, and so I'll wait for this to dry, and then I can take a photo of it, and then you guys can get a sense of, right, how this is really looking for you. Yeah, thank you very much, you guys, for your comments. And I guess that's it. And if anybody has anything they'd like to say, please, I'm here and at your disposal.
Well, we had a lot of compliments here.
Yeah, that's
Thank
nice.
you, Steve. It was
You
great.
guys are welcome. It's been fun. And not all the demos come out pretty good, but I'm pretty happy with this one, so that's good news.
Yeah.
Sometimes you bump into problems. That's the way it rolls.
All right.
Great. Well, thank you,
so
everybody.
much.
I appreciate your time.
And thank you for the great demo.
You're welcome.
I think people really enjoyed it. When you started out, I wasn't sure where you were going with it, but it turned out very, very nice.
Well, in this method, that how I typically approach it, there's a long process of laying in your lights that looks like nothing for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
and then you put the darks in, and it really starts to read. I
have learned over the years that watercolors always go through an ugly phase before.
That's very true.
Before you complete it, and you go, oh, really? But you just got to keep it. It looks great.
Faith is an important part of the artistic process. I have many paintings that I wanted to give up on, and of course some of them did end up being bad paintings, but many didn't. Many like, oh, okay, I got something out of this. So yes, it's helpful to stick around all the way through. All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, everyone.